Q&A.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having House leadership join you today to give you a pre-session commentary on what we think is coming towards us next month. I'm going to start off with some opening remarks. As you know, we start next Monday, and looking forward to a 35-day session that addresses the needs of the state as much as we possibly can do in that amount of time. I want to talk about three areas in particular. One is the number of things in a bipartisan fashion that are coming forward on transparency and good government, making sure that we're responsive to what the public wants us to be doing in terms of being transparent and being open to the public. I want to talk a little bit about the budget and then talk a little bit about housing, which will be a priority in the session coming up. On the good government side, one of the things you're going to see on the opening day, as we do at every session, is we're going to pass the House rules, the rules that govern the operation of the Oregon House, and there will be some changes to the rules which we think are important. There's bipartisan support for these changes, and we believe it's our attempt to say we're looking at how we do business here to try to tighten up how we do business so we can be responsive to the public. You're going to see one of the things that's been out there for a while is the idea of putting the names of the requesters on amendments that get drafted for bills. There's been a lot of discussion, mostly on the Senate side, but both, I believe, Senate and House rules will update their rules to include from going forward that when you request an amendment as a legislator, it'll have either your name on it or your name on behalf of somebody or the committee has requested the amendment. So there's more transparency about how amendments are getting added into the public system. You'll know where they came from. There's also several updates on the House rules for the public records process. Currently, the retention of records in the House is 1 year. We're going to change that to 2 years, which makes sense. We're a biennial system in terms of the budget, so 2-year retention on records for the House. We're going to be improving how we train our staff around public records requests and retention. Normally, we've only done training at the beginning of every odd-numbered session, but we have people who come in, we have staff who come in. The rules will say that we will do much more frequent training, and there will be a requirement that new staff and members will also get to be trained on request and record retention in a timely manner. We're also going to add into the rules a little bit more explanation about how we respond to public records requests. Currently, we have 7 days to say we've received the public records request. The rules will be updated to say if the request has not been completed within 21 days, we will then contact the person again and say we're working on it and give them a deadline. Actually many public records requests that come to the branch are dealt with right away. They're very small. The more complex, lengthier ones will take time, and we want to make sure that we're having some responsiveness, and so you'll see some change in the House rules there. And again, that is a bipartisan approach to say we should be doing as much as we can as a branch to be responsive and transparent. But there will be also a set of bills that you will see. I'm going to run off a couple. There are also some bills that I was just checking on the Republican agenda that are also related to this. I hope Mike talks about them. House Bill 4134 is the governor's bill. It's going to be requiring better reporting from lobbyists when they change clients during session. It would require them to report that change within 5 days. 4135 is also the governor's bill that talks about the next steps in providing, from the executive branch side, more responsiveness on public records requests. Senate Bill 1515 is Senator Gelser's bill and others that works on making sure that we are holding the foster care system in the state more accountable, enforcing the rules that are currently on the books. And then House Bill 4131 is a bill to improve debt collection practices. There's actually 2 bills on debt collection. One around making it easier to get access to information, which is 4131. And then there's another one that says if you're a contractor with the state, you should also be paying your taxes if you're going to want to have business with the state. And lastly, the presiding officers continue to promote accountability. We appointed a joint committee to oversee the Department of Energy. They'll be doing their work from now until the end of the calendar year, looking at ways to potentially address the concerns that have come out of the Department of Energy. And I think I'll end that, but I'm happy to answer questions. And again, I hope the representative from the House Republican Caucus talks about their bills, because we all believe that we want to be responsive, we are transparent, we're one of the most transparent legislatures in the country, but we can always do better, so we're working on that. Budget. Short session is always also a budget session in the sense that we will assess where we are in the budget in terms of making any adjustments for caseload changes or emerging needs. We will have some caseload challenges that in human services, corrections, some small things in the education realm. But in general, we're not going to be making huge new investments that roll up into the next biennium, because we feel that the 15-17 budget was structured in such a way that it is sustainable within our current revenue structure. So you're not going to see a lot of big new investments. What you will see are targeted investments to deal with emerging issues. For example, we expect a specific ask from the UCC Roseburg community to help them deal with the operating costs and some of the facility-related costs after the tragic shooting there in October. So that's an example. I'll be talking about housing. There'll be some asks around housing relief. So the budget will be primarily those kind of targeted things. Our goal is to end the session with a significant reserve, because we will have fire costs, we will have other things that will happen over the course of the biennium before we're back in session in 2017. So we're going to be cautious but targeted in our investments, because things do come up and we'll be addressing those accordingly. Lastly, on the housing front, back in the 2015 session, we started to talk about housing, but I think even over the last couple months, we've realized how much of a crisis the access to affordable housing is in the state, across the state, not just in the metro area. So legislators on both sides of the aisle in both chambers have a variety of bills to work on affordable housing. From my perspective, we have to have a comprehensive approach. There's not one thing that's going to solve it, and we're not going to solve it all in 2016, but we need to take it seriously. So we're going to be working to make state investments in programs like the General Assistance Program, which was cut back in 2003, that we'd like to restore, so individuals who are unable to work, who are living on the streets, can get help and get on to federal Social Security disability benefits. We're asking for $10 million in one-time funding for emergency housing assistance. We do have two programs in the state that help communities around the state with emergency housing. One is the EHA, Emergency Housing Assistance Program. The other is the Shelter Assistance Program, or SHAP. We're asking for $8 million for EHA, $2 million for SHAP. That $10 million total is a one-time ask to go out to communities across the state to help families who are at risk of losing their homes because they can't pay the rent. Or if they're in a shelter, that they're getting more help to get out of shelter into permanent housing. We will be looking at a set of recommendations around further tenant protections in a very unstable rental market. So there was a preview in the legislative days 2 weeks ago about providing renters with 90-day notice on rent increases, protecting renters from retaliation for asking for improvements, protecting renters who have rented but see their rent increase the next month they've moved in, to trying to add protections for the first year of renting. So there is stability for the renter without making it very difficult on the landlords. Lastly, we're continuing to build capacity for affordable housing. We want to look at inclusionary zoning. We will be back on that issue. We're working with all the stakeholders to try to find a compromise there, to figure out what is the best way for there to be a public-private partnership to build more affordable housing across the state. We need to have more tools at the local level. Inclusionary zoning is one of those things. So we're looking at all the things we could possibly be doing, and including potentially expanding the general obligation bond request from 15. We allocated $40 million in general obligation for the LIFT program, which is not yet online yet because the bonds will get issued next year, but perhaps we can have additional bonding obligation for that program. So bottom line on the housing issue, there's not one thing that's going to solve it. It is a statewide crisis, and we need to have as many tools as possible addressing the issue. So with that, I don't know who wants to go next. So
Mike does, it looks like.
Mike.